What's something 2024 superhero reboots, sequels, and spin-offs all have in common? They probably killed off your favorite character. Deadpool and Wolverine proved a slaughterhouse for a number of beloved MCU heroes. For example, longtime Marvel fans were thrilled to hear that Chris Evans returned to the MCU in the cameo-filled threequel. They were even more excited to learn that he'd be reprising his role as the Fantastic Four's Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch. Unfortunately, his performance was cut short pretty quickly, having been pruned by the Time Variance Authority and sent to the void. Johnny aligns himself with a bunch of other heroes against the villainous Cassandra Nova.
I've been trying to catch this little firefly for years. Haven't I, Johnny?
Sadly, after meeting up with Deadpool and Wolverine, Johnny's powers are soon extinguished by Pryor before the trio is captured. After bad-mouthing Nova, Johnny is forced to face fatal consequences when the villain instantaneously removes his skin from his body. Of course, he's not the only beloved character turned casualty in Deadpool and Wolverine. We discover that Ben Affleck's Daredevil, as well as versions of the Punisher, Magneto, and Quicksilver, all perish at the hands of Cassandra Nova and her diabolical forces. Then, of course, there's Nicepool, the lovable Wade Wilson variant who prefers kindness over quippy one-liners, sadly has his head blown off by the Deadpool Corps after Deadpool uses him as a human shield. The Merc with a Mouth is unaware that his kinda variant doesn't have the same regenerative healing abilities, and so he doesn't stand a chance on the battlefield. We don't know too much about where Nicepool comes from, but we do know that he dies a hero, or at least that's what Deadpool tells Wolverine before the clawed mutant puts him in his place. Superman and Lois ended his powerful third season with the arrival of Michael Cudlett's Lex Luthor. Before long, he creates his own version of the supervillain Doomsday in order to ensure that Superman stays dead and Lois Lane is punished for getting him thrown in prison. The fourth and final season opened with a continuation of the brawl between the Man of Steel and his monstrous opponent, and it ended about the same way it always does. In his very first episode back, Doomsday rips Superman's heart out and delivers it to Lex Luthor.
You have something for me?
The fallout from Superman's death is hard to watch, as Lois and her sons mourn their husband and father. We couldn't help but wonder if this was really it. Although Clark Kent was still appearing in flashbacks during the first few episodes of the season, it seemed as if the Man of Steel was truly gone. But after Lois's father heroically sacrifices himself by giving his heart to save Superman, Kal-El was restored to life in his Fortress of Solitude. Of course, even though Superman is resurrected, he's not the same. Now that he has a human heart, he has real limitations that he's never experienced before. Even so, we're glad that at least one of the deaths on this list was reversed. With a title like Venom: The Last Dance, it's not hard to imagine how the titular Lethal Protector might fall in battle in the third and seemingly final outing of the Venom series. After Eddie Brock and Venom are forced on the run, the pair find themselves chased by not just the people of Earth, but those from the symbiote's homeworld as well. Null, the overlord of Clintar, wants a codex that was created when Venom resurrected Eddie from death back in the first movie. Because of this, it will likely mean that the two will die as Null's enforcers invade the planet. Thankfully, that only proves half true. The duo end up at Area 51, where the xenophages attack. Realizing that the only way to save Eddie and stop Null is by destroying the codex, Venom sacrifices himself and dies in a vat of acid as Eddie is helpless to stop it. Though Eddie is eventually saved and cleared of all the charges that Venom racked up, he struggles to move on without his former symbiote life partner. To make things even more interesting, the Venom: The Last Dance post-credit scene introduces a black cockroach possessed by a sample of Venom crawling out from the wreckage. This leaves us with a sliver of hope that Venom, or at least a piece of him, may still be out there. 2024's A Crow is a second live-action attempt at adapting the original James O'Barr graphic novel, but unlike the 1994 Brandon Lee picture, it's unlikely this one will garner a cult following. The truth is, adding The Crow to this list is sort of a cheat. Indeed, one of the prerequisites to becoming The Crow in the first place means that one has to actually die, and that's exactly what happens to Bill Skarsgård's Eric early in the film.
When someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead.
But that's not all. After becoming the Crow to avenge his death and the death of his lover, Shelley, he targets her killer. While Eric does get revenge, sending the villain to the underworld and saving Shelley's soul from damnation, he does so at the cost of his own life on Earth. When Shelley is revived on the very night she died, she's told that Eric gave his life for hers. While the Crow himself is still out there in the afterlife, he's effectively dead, having sacrificed himself to save the woman he loves. It's heroic for sure, but it's just too bad that 2024's The Crow isn't nearly as good as the version that came out 30 years prior. 2024 saw the latest of several fairly recent Crisis on Infinite Earths adaptations with the animated trilogy Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. Just as in the original comic book, there were some pretty heartbreaking deaths that occur, particularly those of the Flash and Supergirl. These two famously died first in the original 1985 comic book series and remained dead for quite some time going forward. Though they each escaped their fate in the live-action Arrowverse adaptation, Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths returns to form by killing off the Flash in Part 1 and Supergirl in Part 3. And while these were probably the biggest losses to the DC animated universe, they were far from the only ones that hurt. In fact, the worlds of the original Super Friends, the early 2000s Teen Titans animated series, and the DC animated universe are all wiped out during the Crisis event. Even the Tomorrowverse, the main continuity of the animated trilogy, is seemingly rebirthed at the very end, different than it was originally. Does this mean that these characters can't come back? Certainly not, but they may never be the same again, especially considering that Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3 features the very final lines that Kevin Conroy performed as Batman before his death in 2022. The same goes for Mark Hamill's Joker, as he retired from the role following Conroy's passing. As an honorable tribute to the past animated worlds of DC, Crisis on Infinite Earths says a final farewell we just can't ignore. Much like in Crisis on Infinite Earths, we lost a shocking number of Marvel heroes in one fell swoop in the attack on Genosha in X-Men 97. While Channing Tatum's Gambit from Deadpool and Wolverine is still safe, the attack did cost us another variant of the card-playing mutant. While he and Rogue reunited to defeat the newly born Master Mold during the attack, Gambit ends up sacrificing himself to defeat the mutant killer and save his true love.
Gambit, see your bet and raise it!
Another member of the team who doesn't get the ending she deserves is Madelyne Pryor. After being brainwashed by Mr. Sinister, the X-Men turn on the Jean Grey clone. She eventually moves on and builds a life for herself on Genosha as a heroic leader for her people. Unfortunately, it all ends far too soon. Although her son Cable travels from the future to warn her of her death, he's unable to prevent it. Instead, Madelyne is killed in the initial shockwave of the attack, her body later found and put to rest by the survivors. And though we didn't see much of Banshee or Marrow in X-Men 97, both were once prominent members of the X-Men in the comics. Sadly, the show won't be bringing them back again, as these two are tragically vaporized in the Genosha attack when a Sentinel gets hold of them. To call the comedian a superhero may be a stretch, but considering his place in The Watchmen, we can't exactly ignore him. And while he's technically been dead since the 80s, since we're talking film and TV, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that the character dies yet again in the recent animated feature, Watchmen Chapter 1. As this new adaptation of the original Alan Moore graphic novel is meant to be more accurate to the comic than ever before, that means it opens a story with comedian's death. Watchmen Chapter 2 continues the story from Rorschach's jailbreak to the very end of the classic DC graphic novel. Just as he does in the comics, Rorschach dies as a result of sticking to the truth and proves himself the only real hero in the story who cares about the concept. Again, Rorschach's death doesn't come as a surprise, but considering the reason behind it, it still feels pretty tragic. If the original graphic novel and the greater DC universe tells us anything, it's that his legacy will live on and the truth about Ozymandias' actions will eventually come to light. You probably didn't expect this list to end on a happy note, but Invincible really faked us out with this one. Although both Dupli-Kate and Shrinking Rae are seemingly killed in the Season 2 episode This Must Come as a Shock, they are both later revealed to actually be alive. In going up against the Lizard League, Shrinking Rae is literally eaten alive, and every duplicate of Dupli-Kate is mauled to death in combat. It's a scene meant to be shocking and provocative, and to remind us that the Lizard League is actually more of a threat than the Guardians of the Globe ever thought. The thing is, both characters are later revealed to be alive. Somehow, Rae makes it out of Komodo Dragon still breathing, though she's immediately hospitalized for her injuries. But it isn't until the season finale, I Thought You Were Stronger, that we learn that Kate survived as well. It turns out the original Kate quit superheroics to live a normal life, allowing one of her duplicates to continue on as the main duplicate on the Guardians roster. Realizing that she can't turn her back on the Guardians or her lover, the Immortal, she reveals that she's still alive. Though Kate and Rae were quickly thought dead, Invincible played us all along. With Season 3 airing in early 2025, we're sure we're due for some heartbreaking losses in the very near future.